Stay home, sweetheart. There's a massive storm coming. The park will probably be closed anyway. My mom's voice crackled through the phone, carrying that familiar tone of concern I'd grown up hearing. Everyone's canceling their plans. Safety first, right? I stared out my apartment window at the perfectly clear Los Angeles sky, my packed suitcase mocking me from the corner of my room. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 28, I was about to discover just how far my family would go to exclude me from their lives. Are you sure, Mom? The weather report doesn't mention anything about a storm, I said, pulling up the forecast on my laptop. Southern California was set for a week of sunshine and mild temperatures, perfect theme park weather. Oh, you know how unpredictable these things can be, she replied quickly. Your father's already canceled the hotel reservations. Maybe we can reschedule for another time when the weather's better. I wanted to argue, to point out that I'd taken time off work for this trip, that I'd been looking forward to our first family vacation in years. But experience had taught me it would be pointless. My younger sister, Madison, was probably already with them, her husband Tom too, all of them nodding along to Mom's weather concerns while secretly finalizing their plans. All right, I said quietly, keep me posted about rescheduling. The line went dead, and I sat there in silence, the familiar weight of exclusion settling over me. Working as an environmental engineer meant I often missed family gatherings due to project deadlines and fieldwork. But this time was different. I had specifically cleared my schedule, even turning down a major project to ensure I could make it. The next morning, I was drowning myself in work reports when my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Madison had posted a new photo. My finger hovered over the alert, a sense of dread already building in my stomach. I clicked it. There they were, all of them, standing in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle. Mom, Dad, Madison, and Tom, wearing matching Mickey ears and broad smiles. The caption read, "Perfect day at the happiest place on earth. #FamilyTime, #blessed." The timestamp showed it was posted just 20 minutes ago. My hands didn't shake as I screenshotted the post. My voice didn't waver as I forwarded it to my best friend, Diana, with a simple message, "Guess the storm cleared up." Diana's response was immediate. "Those manipulative. I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there." But I was already doing something. Years of being the family afterthought. The responsible one who was too busy, too serious, too different, had taught me to prepare for moments like this. I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Family Patterns. Inside were screenshots, emails, text messages, a documented history of similar incidents. The Thanksgiving they claimed was canceled due to food poisoning, only for Madison to accidentally tag everyone in her turkey dinner photos. The Christmas gathering that was too complicated to organize until I saw the group pictures on Dad's Facebook. Each excuse, each exclusion, carefully saved and dated. Diana arrived 30 minutes later, letting herself in with her spare key. She found me at my desk, methodically organizing my evidence. "Liv, honey, what are you doing?" she asked, setting down her bag and peering over my shoulder. "Building a case," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Did you know that in the past 2 years, they've excluded me from 17 family events, each time with a different excuse? Weather, illness, scheduling conflicts. They're getting creative, I'll give them that." Diana pulled up a chair beside me, her face a mixture of concern and anger. "And what exactly are you planning to do with this information?" I finally looked up, meeting her worried gaze. "Something they won't expect. They think I'm the predictable one, the reliable daughter who'll always understand, always forgive. But I learned something from all those environmental impact studies I've done. Every action has consequences." "Olivia," Diana started, but I cut her off. "Do you remember last month when Dad called asking for my help with their retirement planning? How he wanted my professional opinion on some investments?" Diana nodded slowly. "You spent a whole weekend reviewing their portfolio." "Well, what they don't know is that while I was doing that review, I discovered something interesting. That dream house they're planning to buy next year, the one they think they're getting such a good deal on, it's sitting on contaminated land." Diana's eyes widened. "What kind of contamination?" "Nothing immediately dangerous," I assured her, pulling up another file on my laptop. "But enough that they'd need to spend at least twice their budget on remediation before it would be safe to live there." The current owners are trying to offload it before the environmental report becomes public. And you haven't told them. I shook my head. I was planning to break the news during the Disneyland trip. Thought it would be better to discuss it in person, help them find a better property. But now, my phone buzzed again. Another Instagram post from Madison. Splash Mountain with my amazing parents. Sorry you couldn't make it, sis. Maybe next time. #family fun. Diana let out a low whistle. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. No, I agreed, saving the new post to my evidence folder. They're not, which means it's time I stopped hiding too. I pulled up my email and began composing a message to my father's real estate agent, copying the Environmental Protection Agency and local zoning board. Diana read over my shoulder as I drafted a detailed report about the property's contamination issues, complete with soil samples and test results from my own independent investigation. Are you sure about this? Diana asked quietly. Once you send this, there's no going back. That house deal will fall apart. I paused, my cursor hovering over the send button. In my mind, I could see them all at Disneyland right now, probably laughing and making memories without a second thought about me, the responsible daughter, too busy with her serious job to enjoy family time. The one they could always count on to understand, to forgive, to stay quiet. They made their choice, I said firmly, clicking send. Now I'm making mine. The response was almost immediate. My father's real estate agent replied within minutes, clearly alarmed by the information. The zoning board wanted to schedule an immediate review. The current property owner's lawyer was requesting an urgent meeting. As the emails flooded in, I turned to Diana with a grim smile. Want to guess how long it'll take them to call me for help fixing this? They don't deserve your help, Diana said fiercely. Let them figure it out themselves. I shook my head, already formulating my next move. Oh, I'll help them, just not in the way they expect. Remember that property I looked at last year? The one with the amazing mountain view? Diana's eyes lit up with recognition. The one next to the contaminated lot. The very same, I confirmed, pulling up the listing. Its value is about to drop significantly once word gets out about the neighboring property, and I just happen to have a very good relationship with the seller. My phone buzzed again. Another family photo from Disneyland. This time, I didn't even look at it. Instead, I picked up my car keys and grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? Diana asked, following me to the door. To make an offer on my new house, I replied. After all, Mom always said location is everything. And I think living next door to their dream home that they can never buy would be perfect. Diana stared at me for a moment before breaking into a wide grin. You know what? I think it's time everyone learned that the responsible daughter isn't as predictable as they thought. As I drove toward the realtor's office, my phone kept buzzing with more family photos and messages. But for the first time in years, I felt no urge to look at them. They were at the happiest place on earth, making memories without me, and I was finally about to make some memories of my own, ones that would remind them that excluding me had consequences they never saw coming. The realtor, Sarah Palmer, was waiting for me when I arrived, clearly surprised by my unexpected visit. Olivia, I wasn't expecting you today. Is everything all right? I smiled, feeling more confident with each passing moment. Everything's perfect, Sarah. Remember that Mountain View property we looked at last year? I think it's time we discussed making an offer. As Sarah pulled up the listing, I checked my email one last time. The zoning board had already scheduled an emergency meeting about the contaminated property. My father's real estate agent was frantically trying to reach him, and my phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother. Apparently, the storm had cleared up enough for them to worry about their investment. I turned my phone off and focused on Sarah's computer screen. Let's talk numbers, I said. I think we both know that property is about to become a very interesting investment opportunity. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of paperwork and negotiations. By the time I left Sarah's office, I had submitted a competitive offer on the Mountain View property, one that would be even more attractive once the news about the neighboring contaminated lot became public. Diana was still at my apartment when I returned, having ordered takeout and opened a bottle of wine. Well, she asked as I walked through the door. I held up the offer paperwork with a smile. Let's just say that while they're enjoying their day at Disneyland, I'm about to become their worst nightmare. The neighbor they can't avoid and the daughter they can't ignore. Diana raised her wine glass in a toast. to the responsible daughter finally teaching them all about real responsibility. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling lighter than I had in years. To consequences they never saw coming. My phone remained off, sitting in my bag like a ticking time bomb. Tomorrow, I would deal with their calls, their excuses, their attempts to explain away both their Disneyland deception and the house disaster. But tonight, I would celebrate taking control of my own story. After all, they weren't the only ones who could make plans without including the whole family. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. My family had apparently discovered the impending disaster with their dream house sometime during their magical day at Disneyland. I scrolled through the messages while sipping my morning coffee. Mom, Olivia, please call immediately. It's an emergency. Dad, why didn't you tell us about the contamination? We need to talk now. Madison, OMG, Liv, you're literally ruining everything. Call Mom before she has a breakdown. Tom, hey, sis-in-law, whatever's going on, let's talk it out. The last message from my mother caught my eye. Mom, we're coming over. This needs to be discussed in person. I glanced at my watch. Knowing my family, they'd probably already left Anaheim and were headed straight for my apartment. I had maybe an hour before the storm they fabricated yesterday arrived on my doorstep. Perfect. I called Diana, who answered on the first ring. They're coming over, I said without preamble. Want me there? She asked immediately. No, I replied, moving to my home office. But stay by your phone. You're my witness to everything that's about to happen. I set up my laptop, opened a recording program, and positioned my phone to capture video of my entire office. Years of environmental impact studies had taught me the importance of documentation. Today would be no different. Right on schedule, at 9:47 a.m., my doorbell rang. I pressed record and opened the door to find my entire family standing there, still wearing their Disneyland outfits from yesterday, looking considerably less cheerful than their Instagram photos. How could you do this to us? My mother burst out before I could even say hello. She pushed past me into the apartment, followed by Dad, Madison, and Tom. I closed the door calmly. Do what exactly? Report an environmental hazard that could have seriously impacted your health and financial future, or are we talking about something else? Don't play innocent, Madison snapped, her Mickey ears slightly askew. You deliberately sabotage Mom and Dad's retirement plan. I walked to my office, knowing they would follow. Interesting choice of words, Madison. Let's talk about deliberate actions, shall we? I sat behind my desk, gesturing for them to take seats. My father remained standing, pacing near the window. The house deal is falling apart, he said, running his hands through his hair. The sellers are threatening legal action because we tried to back out. The real estate agent won't return my calls. The zoning board wants to schedule hearings. That sounds stressful, I said, pulling up my folder of evidence on my laptop. Almost as stressful as, say, taking time off work for a family vacation only to be told it was canceled due to a non-existent storm. The room went silent. Madison's face flushed red, while my mother suddenly became very interested in her shoes. That's completely different, my father stammered. Is it? I turned my laptop screen toward them, showing the folder labeled Family Patterns. Let's review some history, shall we? Last Thanksgiving, supposedly canceled due to food poisoning. Christmas too complicated to organize. My birthday dinner, postponed due to scheduling conflicts. And now a family trip to Disneyland, canceled because of a storm that mysteriously only affected me. You're always so busy, my mother interjected. We just assumed. You assumed I wouldn't find out, or you assumed I would just accept it like I always do. I opened the Instagram photos they'd posted yesterday. At least try to be less obvious next time. Although I suppose there won't be a next time, will there? Tom, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. Olivia, I understand you're hurt, but using your professional knowledge to sabotage your parents' retirement. I didn't sabotage anything. I cut him off. I reported a genuine environmental hazard that could have cost them their entire retirement savings. The fact that I chose to report it today instead of discussing it with them during our family trip, the one that was canceled due to dangerous weather, is simply unfortunate timing. Madison jumped up from her chair. This is exactly why we don't include you in things. You're always so calculating, so cold. Everything has to be documented and analyzed. You can't just let things be. I smiled, gesturing to my recording setup. You mean like I'm documenting this conversation right now? They all froze, finally noticing the phone recording them and the computer program running in the background. You're recording this? My father asked incredulously. Of course I am. Just like I've documented every excluded event, every lie, every excuse for the past 2 years. Would you like to see the spreadsheet? I categorize them by type of excuse used. Weather is actually pretty low on the list. You seem to prefer health-related emergencies. My mother sank into a chair, her face pale. Olivia, honey, we never meant to hurt you. No, I agreed. You just meant to exclude me without consequences. Unfortunately for you, I specialize in studying long-term consequences. And they're finally catching up. I pulled up another document on my screen. Now about that contaminated property. I have a solution that could help everyone, but first, we need to establish some new family ground rules. Ground rules? My father scoffed. We're your parents, not your business associates. Exactly. You're my parents, which makes your pattern of exclusion and deception even more problematic. So here are the terms. Complete honesty from now on. No more fake cancellations. No more excuses. If you don't want me at an event, say it to my face. Madison rolled her eyes. Or what? You'll keep sabotaging our lives. No, Madison. I'll simply continue letting natural consequences unfold. Like the consequence of the neighboring property I just made an offer on yesterday. My father's head snapped up. What neighboring property? The Mountain View lot next to your dream house. The one that's about to become an incredible bargain once news of the contamination goes public. I think you'll make a lovely weekend home, don't you? We'll be neighbors. The color drained from my mother's face. You wouldn't. Why not? It's a sound investment. The contamination doesn't affect that lot, and the price will be fantastic once your dream property is officially declared a hazard. I might even build a pool. We can watch the remediation work from it. Tom let out a low whistle. Damn, Olivia. I didn't think you had this in you. That's the problem, I replied coolly. None of you thought I had this in me. You thought I would keep accepting the lies, the exclusions, the last-minute cancellations. You thought being the responsible daughter meant being the doormat daughter. I stood up, walking to my window. So here's what's going to happen. I can help you navigate this property situation. I have contacts who can expedite the environmental review process, potentially saving you months of legal headaches. I might even be willing to withdraw my offer on the neighboring lot. What do you want? My father asked, his voice tired. I turned back to face them. I want respect. I want honesty. I want to be treated like a member of this family instead of an inconvenience you have to manage. And I want a real explanation for why you felt the need to lie about Disneyland instead of simply telling me I wasn't welcome. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stared at her hands, Tom shifted uncomfortably, and my parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Finally, my mother spoke. You're so different from us, Olivia. You're always working, always serious. Madison suggested making the trip more casual, more spontaneous. We thought you wouldn't enjoy it. So you lied to me instead of asking me, created a fictional storm rather than having an honest conversation. We didn't want to hurt your feelings, Madison mumbled. No, you just wanted to exclude me without dealing with the guilt. Well, congratulations. You succeeded in excluding me. But now you get to deal with the consequences. I sat back down at my desk, pulling up my email. I have a meeting with the zoning board tomorrow morning. I also have a follow-up call with my realtor about the neighboring property. The next move is yours. What do you want us to do? My father asked, sounding defeated. I want you to leave my apartment, go home, and really think about why you've been systematically excluding your daughter from family events. Then, if you're ready to have an honest conversation, we can discuss how to move forward, both with the property situation and with our relationship. And if we don't? Madison challenged. I smiled. Then I hope you'll enjoy having me as a neighbor. I hear the mountain view is spectacular. One by one, they filed out of my office. My mother paused at the door, turning back with tears in her eyes. We really did miss you at Disneyland, sweetie. No, Mom, you didn't. If you had, you would have wanted me there. But maybe next time, instead of creating fictional storms, you'll consider simply telling me the truth. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment, listening to the sound of their car pulling away. Diana called almost immediately. Well, she asked. How did it go? I started sending her the recording. Exactly as expected. They're upset about the consequences but still can't quite understand why their actions were wrong. Are you really going to buy that neighboring property? I looked at the offer paperwork on my desk. That depends entirely on them. The ball's in their court now. And the contamination situation? Are you going to help them? Eventually, I admitted. They're still my family. But first, they need to understand that being the responsible one doesn't mean being the pushover. Sometimes being responsible means holding people accountable. I spent the rest of the day reviewing work projects, deliberately not checking my phone. Let them sit with their thoughts for a while. Let them experience what it felt like to be the ones waiting for communication, uncertain about what would happen next. Around dinner time, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. We need to talk, really talk. No excuses, no storms. Dinner tomorrow. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Yes, but I picked the restaurant, and I expect everyone to be honest about whether they actually want to be there. His response came quickly. We want to be there. All of us. We have a lot to make up for. I set my phone down, walking to my window to watch the sunset. The sky was clear, just as it had been yesterday when they fabricated their storm. But maybe, just maybe, the real clouds in our family were finally starting to clear. Diana called again before bed. Are you going to dinner with them tomorrow? Yes, I said, looking at my evidence folder. But I'm keeping all of this, just in case they need another reminder about consequences. And the house situation. I smiled, thinking about the look on their faces when I mentioned buying the neighboring property. Let's just say I have a feeling tomorrow's dinner conversation will be very interesting. After all, I thought as I got ready for bed, sometimes the best way to teach people about responsibility is to show them exactly what it looks like in action. The restaurant I chose for dinner was neither fancy nor casual, a neutral ground where we'd never eaten as a family before. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that would give us privacy while still allowing me to record our conversation if necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Good luck. Remember, you're not the one who needs to apologize. I was reviewing the property documents one last time when they arrived, altogether again, but markedly different from yesterday. Gone were the Disneyland outfits and Mickey ears, replaced by subdued business casual wear. They looked like they were attending a mediation session, which in a way, they were. Olivia, my mother started as they sat down. We spent all day talking as a family, and I held up my hand. Before we begin, I have a question for each of you. I want honest answers, no sugarcoating. Do you actually want to be here right now? The silence that followed was telling. Madison shifted uncomfortably, Tom studied the menu with unusual intensity, and my parents exchanged glances. I'll start, I continued. I want to be here because I believe this family is worth salvaging, but only if we can build it on honesty instead of convenient lies. Your turn. My father cleared his throat. I want to be here because I realize we've made serious mistakes, not just about the house situation. Mom nodded. I'm here because I miss my daughter, my real daughter, not the version of you we've created in our minds to justify our behavior. Madison stared at her water glass. I'm here because I feel guilty, and maybe a little scared of what else you might have documented. Tom actually chuckled. I'm here because someone finally stood up to this family's dysfunction, and I want to see how it plays out. Well, I said, pulling out my laptop, let's start with the house situation since that's the most pressing issue. Before that, my father interrupted. We owe you an explanation about Disneyland. About everything, really. I sat back, gesturing for him to continue. This should be interesting. Madison came to us with the idea, he began. She said we needed more spontaneous family time, less planning, more fun. She suggested that your personality, that I was too rigid, I finished for him. Too serious, too focused on documentation and details. Madison jumped in. It wasn't meant to be cruel, Liv. It's just, you're always working, always analyzing everything. We wanted one trip where we didn't have to worry about schedules and plans and the truth, I suggested, because instead of telling me this directly, you chose to create elaborate lies. How does that fit with wanting things to be more spontaneous and carefree? The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a brief respite from the tension. After he left, my mother reached across the table for my hand. I let her take it, noting the slight tremor in her fingers. We convinced ourselves we were protecting you, she said softly. That you were too busy, too focused on your career to enjoy simple family time. But really, we were protecting ourselves from having to face the fact that we created this divide in our family. And the other events? I asked, pulling up my documentation folder. The canceled holidays? The rescheduled dinners? Tom leaned forward. Can I be brutally honest here? At my nod, he continued, this family has a serious communication problem. Instead of telling each other the truth, you all create these elaborate scenarios to avoid confrontation. I've watched it happen since Madison and I started dating. Madison turned to him, surprised. You never said anything. Would anyone have listened? He asked. Even our wedding had 3 different fake crises created to manage the guest list without actually telling anyone they weren't invited. I couldn't help but smile. Let me guess. Weather, illness, and venue capacity issues. Got it in one, Tom confirmed. It's like this family has a playbook for avoidance. Which brings us back to the house situation, I said, turning my laptop around to show them the environmental reports. Did it occur to any of you that if you'd actually included me in the Disneyland trip, you might have learned about the contamination issue in a much less dramatic way? My father's face fell. I haven't been able to reach the sellers since yesterday. Their lawyer says they're considering legal action for breach of contract. I know, I replied. I've been copied on most of the emails. Would you like to know what I've been doing while you were all discussing my personality flaws? I pulled up another document, this one showing a series of email exchanges with environmental consultants and legal experts. I've been working on a solution. The contamination isn't as severe as initially reported, and there's a remediation plan that could make the property safe within 6 months. The cost would be significant but less than you'd lose in a legal battle with the current owners. My mother's eyes widened. You've been helping us, even after everything. That's what family does, Mom, real family. Not the kind that creates fake storms to avoid difficult conversations. Madison leaned forward, actually looking interested for the first time. What about the neighboring property? Were you really going to buy it? I smiled. The offer was real. Still is actually. But I'm willing to withdraw it on one condition. What's that? My father asked. Complete transparency from now on. No more fake cancellations, no more convenient excuses. If you don't want me at an event, tell me. If you think I'm being too rigid or serious, say it to my face. I'd rather hear the harsh truth than discover another elaborately constructed lie. The waiter returned with our food, and we ate in contemplative silence for a few minutes. Finally, my father spoke up. The property next door, you knew about it before all this happened, didn't you? You've been watching both properties. I nodded. I've been monitoring real estate in that area for months. When you mentioned you were looking at the dream house, I started investigating. That's what I do, Dad. I pay attention to details. It's not a flaw in my personality, it's what makes me good at my job and apparently good at protecting this family even when they're excluding me. We don't deserve your help, my mother said quietly. Maybe not, I agreed. But that's another difference between us. I don't help because people deserve it. I help because it's right. Now would you like to hear my plan for dealing with this situation? They all nodded, and I spent the next 20 minutes outlining the remediation strategy I developed. My father asked intelligent questions about the timeline and costs, while Madison actually took notes. Tom looked impressed, and my mother kept wiping tears from her eyes. Later that night, as I updated Diana on everything that had happened, she asked, "Do you really trust them to change?" I looked at my evidence folder, still saved on my laptop. Trust needs to be earned. They're starting from zero, but at least now they're starting from a place of truth. And I'll keep documenting everything, just in case. Once an environmental engineer, always an environmental engineer, she teased. Exactly, I agreed. Some habits are worth keeping. 3 months after the Disneyland incident, I stood with my family outside the newly remediated Dream House, watching as the environmental inspectors conducted their final assessment. The property that had nearly torn our family apart was about to become a symbol of our reconstruction. Hard to believe it's the same place, my father said, reviewing the inspection checklist I'd created. You really pulled off a miracle here, Olivia. I smiled, remembering the intense negotiations and late-night planning sessions that had gotten us to this point. The remediation had been expensive, but my solution had saved them hundreds of thousands compared to the potential legal battles they had been facing. Look what came up in my Facebook memories, Madison called out, holding up her phone. It was the photo from Disneyland, the one that had exposed their deception. We looked so smug. I can't believe we thought we'd get away with it. To be fair, Tom added, none of us expected Olivia to have a documentation folder worthy of a federal investigation. My mother touched my arm gently. I found something yesterday while cleaning out the attic. I think you should see it. She handed me a worn notebook, its pages yellowed with age. Opening it, I recognized my childhood handwriting, detailed notes about family events, carefully documented even then. You've always been like this, she said softly. Always paying attention, always noticing things. We treated it like a flaw, but look what it did. It saved this house. It saved our family. The lead inspector approached, clipboard in hand. Ms. Parker, we're ready to review the final results. For the next hour, we went through every detail of the remediation. The contamination had been fully addressed, the soil restored to better than original condition. The property was now safer than most in the area, thanks to the extensive work we'd overseen. I have to admit, my father said as we walked through the house afterward, I understand now why you document everything. This whole process would have been impossible without your attention to detail. I paused in what would become their living room, remembering our dinner conversation 3 months ago. It's not just about the documentation, Dad. It's about trust, about knowing where you stand. Madison flopped onto one of the plastic-covered sofas. Speaking of trust, we need to talk about the family trip we're planning. Ah, yes, the makeup trip. After the Disneyland debacle, they'd suggested a do-over, a chance to create new family memories without deception. We'd been planning it together, openly and honestly, for the past month. Everyone's cards on the table, I said, sitting across from her. How are we feeling about it? My mother joined us, perching on the arm of the sofa. I'll start. I'm excited but nervous. I keep catching myself wanting to fall back into old patterns, trying to manage everyone's experiences instead of just being honest. I appreciate the honesty, I replied. Madison? She twisted her hands in her lap. I'm worried it won't be as spontaneous with all the planning, but I'm trying to understand that spontaneous doesn't have to mean secretive. Tom raised his hand. I'm just happy we're actually talking about these things instead of creating elaborate weather-related excuses. We all laughed, the sound echoing through the empty house. Even that had changed. Our laughter was more genuine now, less forced. We've learned that real joy doesn't need to be manufactured or managed. The contractors can start moving your furniture next week, I said, checking my project timeline. Just in time for the housewarming party. My father looked up sharply. You're still coming to that, right? Even though we didn't handle the guest list very well initially? He was referring to their first attempt at planning the housewarming, where they had fallen back into old habits, trying to create separate events to manage different groups of guests. I caught them in the act, thanks to my ongoing documentation, and called them out on it. Yes, Dad, I'm coming. Because you admitted what you were doing, and we talked about it like adults. That's all I ever wanted. Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Madison stretched out on the sofa. Remember when we thought you were just being difficult? That you were too rigid and serious? To be fair, I replied, I am serious, and I do like things to be properly documented. But now you understand why, and more importantly, you respect it instead of trying to work around it. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. I keep thinking about all the moments we missed, all the memories we didn't make because we were too busy trying to manage everyone's feelings instead of just being honest. We can't get those moments back, I said gently, but we can create new ones. Starting with this house and the family trip, and maybe even next Christmas, if everyone actually wants to spend it together. About that, my father interjected, we should probably tell you, we already started planning Christmas. I tensed automatically, years of conditioning making me expect another exclusion. But then he pulled out his phone and showed me the group chat they created, with me in it. We want you involved from the beginning, he explained. No more secrets, no more convenient excuses. Though I have to admit, Madison's creative weather events will be missed. Madison threw a plastic-wrapped pillow at him. I maintain that the localized earthquake was pretty inspired. Speaking of inspiration, Tom said, should we tell her about the other surprise? My mother nodded enthusiastically. Show her. Madison pulled up something on her phone and handed it to me. It was a booking confirmation for a family retreat, not at Disneyland, but at a mountain resort known for its environmental programs and conservation efforts. We thought, she explained, that maybe instead of trying to make you fit into our kind of vacation, we could try experiencing your world for a change. The resort has daily nature walks where they document local flora and fauna. Very detail-oriented. Very me, I finished, touched by the gesture. Plus, Tom added, there's no chance of surprise weather events because we've already checked the climate patterns for the past decade. Someone's been rubbing off on us. I looked around at my family, seeing them clearly and feeling seen in return. The house that had almost torn us apart had become the catalyst for real change. My phone buzzed. Deanna, checking in as she'd done every day since the Disneyland incident. Everything okay? She texted. I took a photo of my family, all of us together in the newly remediated house, and sent it to her with the caption, "Better than okay. Real." The inspectors need one more signature, my father said, holding out a pen. Would you do the honors? After all, none of this would have been possible without you. As I signed the final clearance document, I thought about the evidence folder still saved on my laptop. I hadn't added to it in months, not because I'd stopped paying attention, but because there hadn't been anything to document. No more exclusions, no more convenient excuses, no more elaborate deceptions. You know, Madison said, watching me carefully file the signed document, I used to think your need to document everything was about control. But it's really about care, isn't it? About paying attention to the things and people that matter. I nodded, surprisingly moved by her observation. Everything leaves a trace if you know where to look. The contamination in the soil, the patterns in family behavior, the truth behind convenient storms. And the path to making things right, my mother added. No convenient storms required.